Hello again, everyone. This is Rudolph Wilkins with Forgotten Fitness, and it's finally time to talk about it, the Larry Scott Preacher Bench. For those of you that are unaware, which I can't imagine is too many of you because I've made it very well known, I have purchased and hunted down and found an original Larry Scott Preacher Bench. And I must say, over the last couple of days, I've been using it extensively and cannot be more happy. There's no way I can be more pleased. I have learned more about this bench and the experience than I could have ever imagined. And it has given me a sense of closeness with Larry Scott and Vince Gironda and the guys from the Golden Era that I can't really describe and put into words very well. To use something that is honestly a relic, a piece of equipment that is no longer really represented in its truest form, to use it how it originally was designed is extraordinary and hard to explain. But a little about my experiences in searching for one of these, because I've been getting plenty of questions asking, where can I buy one? Well, unfortunately, they are no longer made. They were available on Larry Scott's own webpage. He used to sell them among many pieces of other equipment that are no longer being produced. Now, we will get to that a little later, or perhaps in a different video, but there is potential that that could change. But as of now, they are no longer being made. And that's a real shame. There are benches and machines that may imitate some of the things that this bench does, this preacher bench does, but there is no machine that does everything that it does. As far as cost, when these were originally sold, they went for around $650. And then once Larry got sick and ended up passing away, the price jumped to over $900. And yet they were still being sold and very desirable. And that's because they are amazing pieces. So over the last few years, as a Larry Scott and Vince Gironda fan, I have done everything I can to find one of these pieces of equipment. And with no luck. But listening through the grapevine and having certain connections has allowed me to actually find a gentleman who had not just this, but some other pieces of Larry's. And his name is Kevin Steele. Now, Kevin Steele, I'm going to post his picture right here so you can see him. He was an amazing, legendary natural powerlifter from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s who competed in Colorado and represented the U.S. Marines in various different competitions. He was 198 pounds, and his best lift, as far as the deadlift, was 700 pounds, and his best bench was 390 pounds. So he was incredibly strong. In 1991, he opened up his own personal gym and training studio where he trained countless collegiate athletes, as well as professional strongmen and powerlifters. And with that, he was also looking for equipment to buy. And some of the equipment he bought was Larry Scott's equipment, who he contacted in 1991, which predates the signature line, and that's why the colors are a little different. They were also a special request color. The Larry Scott benches that were being sold at the time did have this blue leather, but most of them were white steel or gray steel. So this was a special request to have the steel and black. But when he made this purchase, he purchased the preacher bench, the forearm bench, the tricep machine, the twin pedestal bench, and the calf block, all from Larry Scott. He has since sold all of that away, but I was so fortunate enough to purchase the forearm bench, which you will be seeing in a future video. I will not be covering that today, and the preacher bench. Larry Scott's preacher bench is very interesting for a number of different reasons, but I think it's important to go over sort of its own development. The preacher bench that Larry Scott ended up, as far as a design, is heavily inspired and based off of the preacher bench used in Vince Gironda's gym. Now, that preacher bench was very adjustable as far as height, but it did not have a seat. But the pad was very similar. You had a flat side and you had a rounded side. And when I say flat, I mean it is a right angle. It is completely perpendicular to the ground, not what you see on modern preacher benches. And this is for a number of different reasons. I think it's also important that we go over the modern preacher bench and sort of what it does wrong and what it tries to imitate but fails with regard to the Larry Scott bench. So let us first go over the modern preacher bench. As you can see, this is a really nice preacher bench. I have used this in a couple of my videos. It's made by Pro Maxima. It weighs about 145 pounds, and it's a gym quality preacher bench. It was actually used by a professional arm wrestler named Craig McSherry, who is a very famous and well-respected arm wrestler. He's in his 70s now, but he used this extensively for various different curl variations. But it's very limited when you look at it from a basic perspective, in that the only thing that is adjustable on it is the seat. The pad does not raise up or down, and it is the single sort of sloped incline as far as the padding itself. It is not rounded or contoured for comfort. The pad that is actually on the wooden board is fairly thin and extremely soft. Your elbows press all the way to the wood, which can be quite uncomfortable with heavy weight. In addition, there is no padding on the back of this at all. So when you press your chest into the preacher bench, you're actually pressing your sternum directly into that wood, and it's very, very uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good with heavy weight. One of the most important things, however, is actually the width of the pad itself. If we look at this pad here, it's right at 22.5 inches. Now, when you're doing very heavy weight, even in the style that Vince Gironda and Larry Scott recommended, your elbows will begin to come apart like this. It'll get to a certain point where your elbows are completely off the pad. So again, you're very limited on the amount of weight you can do, because once your elbows come off, you're not making any contact and you're not isolating the biceps, which is the whole point of the preacher bench. So the exercise itself that you can do here is barbells or dumbbells like this, right? In various different forms. You know, you can bring the elbows closer, maybe a little wider, but again, you're limited by how wide you can actually bring the elbows. So the bench itself, even though it's very high quality and well made, it's extremely limited. And what it can do, it can't do all that well in comparison with what you're about to see, the Larry Scott preacher bench. Now on the Larry Scott preacher bench, all of the complaints I had about the modern variety are completely neutralized here. First and foremost is that beautifully rounded and contoured pad. When you actually get on the preacher bench and you're using the rounded side, because remember, you can use the flat side as well for different exercises, you notice that your hands can easily supinate all the way through the bottom. It's very comfortable and it feels incredibly natural. You should also remember, when talking about exercises that Vince Gironda and Larry Scott really enjoyed, they would do a lot of leaning. So they would lean all the way through the bottom, they would kick the hand back, and with this sort of contoured pad, it just feels incredibly comfortable. The padding itself is also made out of a high-density foam, which is something that Larry Scott marketed, so you're never going to make any contact with the wood. It's always padding, and it feels very comfortable. Another thing I complained about the modern variety is that the side that you're actually bracing against has a full pad on it. You can completely brace with the abdominals and the chest, and it's incredibly comfortable when you're doing very heavy weight. Another point that is incredibly important, I said on the modern preacher bench, at least the one I have, 22 inches wide. This one here, we are sitting at 26.5. That means when you go very heavy, even when the elbows are pinched and they start to splay out, you'll always have real estate. Your arms are never flying off the edge of the pad. But one of the most important things with this bench is you do not just have to use it seated, and you can use either the flat or rounded side. Let me show you that first. So the Larry Scott preacher bench simply comes with a pin. I've already pulled it out just for quick, easy adjustment. But all you need to do to switch it around, because it's square stock, you simply pull it out, you switch it around this way, and there you go. Now, you can easily, from the seated position, use the Larry Scott preacher bench on the flat side, which gives you an even deeper stretch for even more range of motion and for different exercises. It gets more intense than that because you can also use it standing. So let me show you all just how tall this thing gets. As you can see, each hole is separated by about 1.5 inches. And like I've said a million times, I am very tall, 6'5". And I can tell you that even for me, this is too tall, which is a beautiful thing. That means between my height and anybody down to Larry's height, and even shorter, you have functionality to be able to use this as a standing bench as well. And that is amazing because there's so many exercises, especially when you go really heavy and are doing barbell curls, where you'll need to almost air sit underneath the bench. And that's something that Vince Gironda very much recommended, to air sit. That way you can use just a little bit of leaning into your curl and extend all the way through at the bottom. Me and my friend have been doing that extensively for the last couple of days, and it feels incredible. Another thing, you don't have to use it on this side with the padding. It's also interesting because you can go on this side and actually lean over like that. You can use the flat side. Again, you can flip it around and use the rounded side on that way. So you can, it's so flexible and customizable. The preacher bench is essentially 6 machines in one. And what I mean by that is you can also do something else that's a little bit interesting. You can do pressing movements. So consider this a sneak peek for the upcoming videos I'm going to be making. But all you want to do as far as pressing exercises, set the bench so that the flat side is towards the pad. You will then turn around, place your back against that pad, get a couple pairs of dumbbells or barbells, and now you can do your pressing movements. And it's extremely comfortable. Again, you've got that long perpendicular pad that you're resting your back against. Absolutely zero pain. Whereas if you were to do this same exercise on a standard preacher bench, it would be quite painful. You can do pressing movements standing as well. And it's pretty sweet. And with that, I would like to give you my closing remarks on Larry Scott's preacher bench. What do I think about it overall? In my opinion, it's the best piece of gym equipment ever made. It's extremely comfortable, functional, and well built. It is the essence of what it means to be an old school fitness fan, an advocate. It has all the qualities you would expect from somebody like Larry Scott, who adopted many of the ideas from Vince Gironda and threw his own spin on them. It is unbelievable. And I have never enjoyed a piece of equipment more in the last few days as I have this. If you can find one in the wild, which they are incredibly hard to find, I would absolutely jump on it immediately. As far as what we can do going into the future, I have some ideas, but I'm going to keep them to myself now. All I'm going to say is hopefully one day we will see these back in production, which is what I hope, because I think the Larry Scott Preacher Bench is extremely underrated and sadly forgotten in the space of gym equipment and fitness in general. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and if you have any recollections of using the Larry Scott Preacher Bench, or if you still own one today, feel free to share it in the comment section below. And until next time, this is Forgotten Fitness signing out. Bye-bye.